Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe. And before we dive into this week's really exciting episode with an author of children's books, we would like to thank all of our Academates and our patrons. If you are one of those, thank you so much for making this podcast happen. And this week we'd like to thank Tara, Beth, Tom, Christine, Aaron, and Diane. So we really appreciate your support, folks. And if you would like to join our merry band of inspired and inspiring writers, pop over to bestsellerexperiment.com/support to read about all of the great things that you can get becoming a supporter of this show. And if you'd like to join the Academy, folks, we are opening the Academy up again for the beginning of September. The academic year begins. Hop over to academy.bestsellerexperiment.com to find out more and get your application in now, because it's happening right this moment. You've got a few more weeks left. So, Mr. Stay, you are busy with copy editing, I believe, sir, this last couple of weeks.
I'm done with copy.
Yes.
Done. They're off. Whoosh.
How does that feel? How does that feel to get that done?
It's great. It's really good, actually. It's because it finally feels like a book I would give to other people to read. So I've got about a week now until I get my proof pages back to check. We can talk about that how I do that next time, because I read them out loud. So I've got a week, and I've been basically I've been writing pitches for new things. So I've finished that, and I've got a first draft of the third book over there, which I'm going to get back into in a couple of weeks. But I'm starting new projects, so I'm at the bottom of the mountain again. You know, pushing that little boulder as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, which is it's always a sobering prospect.
It is, but it must be.
I finished it. Oh, here we go again.
But it must be so lovely. It must be so lovely, because one of the things that we hear a lot of on this podcast from writers, and we're seeing a lot of in the Academy as well, is that people are writing their first drafts and they're like, oh, it's like, oh, yeah. But to get to the copy edit part and to finish that miraculous transformation from, oh my gosh, well, I got to the end of the first draft, now the work begins, to actually having something that you're like, okay, lump of clay has now been shaped into something that's it's actually starting to look a bit beautiful, and I'm actually quite proud of it. That feeling, that jump must fill your tank every time you get there, right?
Well, you've going through the process a few times. I mean, at least once. Having done it once, it's great. Having done it a few times, it's brilliant, because you think, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. You know, it gives you such confidence to think, okay, here we go again. So when you are at the bottom of the mountain, you're thinking, all right, we know what to do. Crack our knuckles, get on with it. Start writing stuff. I mean, some of these pitches are things I've been working on for months, but one of them this morning is literally, okay, I'm going to write a story about something, and it really is that basic. You know, what am I going to write a story about? Yeah, it's exciting. You've got to keep moving. You're like a shark. You don't keep moving forward, you know?
Yeah, it's like the seasons changing. Like we come around to spring each year, and you get like that renewal of things when you've been through the kind of the dead of winter, which is sometimes like maybe the muddy middle, or the kind of desperation of like the first draft maybe not turning out quite how you wanted it to. But I think I remember when we went through that process with Back to Reality, we had that whole journey of kind of seeing this very pliable piece of metal being slowly bashed into shape. And sometimes it is bashing, isn't it? Sometimes you have to get a hammer and go, right, first, chapter 1. You remember that when we were told by the editor, guys, you know, the chapter 1's really just a bit of kind of preemptive, like get to the action. And we had to make that decision, and we lost that whole chapter, didn't we?
I don't like the word bashed. I prefer forged. Like a magical sword of Valerian steel. You know? So yeah. It's that's
Forge
how
is lovely,
because it does strengthen it. It does strengthen it, you know. So it's that's how I feel about it. And I've had a really fun week on the Academy as well, because we've added a new feature to the Academy where if we've had a podcast, we now have a little session with me and the Academates where we talk about the podcast. So we talk about stuff that came up. So we were talking about Nicola May and, you know, branding and writing humor and writing in bed, more of that at the end of the show. And so that was really, really fun. And we just had a really great session on point of view as well. So yeah, it's all of that stuff being part of a community like that really, again, especially when you're at the bottom of the mountain, you're thinking, oh, here we go again.
When you
really
need to be
puts
picked up.
fire in your belly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's terrific.
And actually talking of, I mean, we've talked about accountability so much on this show over the years, and even more so as we've recognized just how important it is. And this month, Mark, I have put my money where my mouth is, and I set up on the Academy a writing buddy program. And the way it works is each month you get a new writing buddy. So it's somebody that you check in with each day. Just a quick message. Hey, I wrote 200 words a day, or hey, I whopped it out of the park, or today was awful. And you also have these great kind of little chats with your partner. But I decided if I'm doing this, if I'm organizing this for all of the Academates, and we've got a number of them who are really keen to get more accountability on a daily basis, because writing 200 words a day is hard, or a minimum of. I thought I'll put my name down as first on the list, just to kind of like give it a go. And this was beginning of July. And so we're now recording this towards the end of July. So I've had a month of being held accountable by my partner, Heather, who lives in Australia, which is brilliant. She's always ahead of me. That's the thing that sucks. Yeah. It's like she'd always put it, and it's great though. It's great because from a lot of the trials that we did, I found that being prompted by your partner when they send you their word count, it makes you think, oh, blimey, I've got to do mine. And it's a human being. It's not like an email, or it's not like your own kind of memory or your to-do list. It's a human being saying, hey, I did this. But the thing that's so lovely about it is what tends to happen, and we found this from a lot of people who are doing it, is you get these kind of little mini conversations about, well, what you're writing. For example, I'm reading this great book, and I said, oh, have you read this book? And now she's reading it. So it's like these little kind of buddies that you're kind of just supporting, you're cheerleadering each other on, and it really works. So we've got a ton of people signed up for it, and it's one of the benefits that I think is going to be huge for people in the Academy to actually get their book finished. So I'm loving that, actually. And I've written more words this month than I think I've written in any month this year, just as a result of having that buddy. So that's been really, really exciting and fun. And nothing like being held accountable as well. I tell you, it's like everyone needs an accountability buddy, I think. I mean, in the traditional world, publishers are those accountability, but not what percentage of authors have that? Like probably not even 1% if you take the entire population of authors in the world. So we have to kind of work and create that. And maybe to help us get to the point where we've got a book ready for a publisher. It doesn't have to be. I said in a recent coaching session that writing is a very isolated task, but the journey of writing doesn't have to be isolation. We should be sharing that with other writers. And I think everyone should have a support group, no matter how insular or isolated you write. You should have other people that you can share the pains of the process with, because it's
absolutely. It's particularly not just when you start out, but through your whole career. I don't think that ever goes away for anyone.
Completely.
There's I've got good friends or good author friends, and we are shoulders to cry on. We are cheerleaders. I had a conversation with an author just earlier this week who's having issues with their agent, and so we had a full and frank conversation about that and what their options are. And they knew what they were going to do. They just needed to talk to someone else. And you can't just clam yourself up into a shell and pretend and do this on your own. It's the temptation's there, especially in lockdown, and if it's just you on the screen on your pad or whatever. But yeah, it's there are always people out there. I think the writing community is always very, very generous with its help, and you just need to ask for help. You just need to. Something Nicola May was saying last week: ask for help, and you'll get it.
Yeah, we had an example in the Academy actually of somebody who wrote to me directly and said, I just want to say that this particular, I won't mention names to embarrass them live on air, but they said this particular person has been such an incredible help and has been taken time to give me such amazing feedback on my book and my chapters, and guiding me and helping me. And I made a point of writing to that person to thank them for all of the effort they've done. And I said to them these words. I said, if the old adage of, what you give out, you get back stands true, you've got an amazing future ahead of you, because you learn so much by helping others as well, or being a part of other people's journeys. As writers, like what we always encourage people to, in the academy, to do beta reading of other academates' books, because by beta reading someone else's book, you're not just helping them, but you're learning so much about what makes writing great or not so great. Often the problem is that we pick up the number one bestseller off the shelf, we read it, and we think, I can never write something as good as this, and it just knocks us down. If you read a book which is by somebody who's kind of earlier in their process and might not be the most brilliant piece of prose, it actually gives you an opportunity to say, you know what? I remember when I was in this kind of phase of my writing, and look how much I've progressed. So actually reading other people's works that aren't necessarily like number one best-selling authors can give you a perspective on where you are in the journey, and also kind of reminds you of what you're doing well, or in a case of a great book, reminds you what you could be doing better. So there's just so many huge benefits. And actually, I think we've seen, haven't we, over the years with all the people that we've worked with, the people that get really stuck and involved with other writers are the ones who tend to have the most success. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah, no question. The people you see online offering look at Joanne Harris, and she's just been through chemotherapy and she's still doing daily writing tips and stuff on Twitter. And, people like that, the people you see on the panels, they are beloved because they put themselves out there, and offer advice. So you get, I think you definitely, have you been watching Ted Lasso? Because it's on Apple TV.
I started watching it actually, because it's what season is it now? Is it season?
They've just started season 2.
Yeah. For people who haven't seen it, it's about a football coach.
That's so reductive, because this is like what if Mark DeVoe was a football coach? It's like they've seen the Mark DeVoe tick list and gone, yeah, we'll have some really good self-help stuff. We'll have some football. We'll have some humour. Well, yeah. And I just wondered if you'd seen it, because Claire and I have just had a rewatch, and the writing in that is sublime. But what I found absolutely brilliant, because there's basically 2 key female characters in it, who I think in lesser hands, these characters would be rivals. They'd be at each other. But because they're the only 2 women in a very male environment, they support each other. They help each other out. And I just thought that's a really, really clever, that's actually really difficult writing, to do that properly. But keep watching it, because it gets better and better and better. It's one of the best shows on TV.
Excellent stuff. And just going back to what you were saying about like going, having, even if you've been successful, you've launched, you've released books, the whole point of having that kind of accountability for writing is so important. And I just remember Ian Sainsbury saying that, even after he had won the Kindle Award, massive accomplishment, like he went through difficult times of trying to get himself going again. And he said that the 200-word challenge was absolutely gold dust for him to just keep going. So if you're finding yourself in that kind of valley, or you've found that you've fallen a bit off the wagon, we all do, all the time. I mean, it's a cycle. It's like the seasons, right? We have good weeks and bad weeks, good days and bad days even. Think about doing the 200-word challenge. If you're not signed up yet, 200wordchallenge.com. We've had some incredible people talking. I've seen some wonderful feedback from people who've said, without this, I wouldn't be where I am today. So we'll probably talk a bit more about that towards the end of the show. But yeah, get over to 200wordchallenge.com and join the thousands of people that are now signed up to it. It's quite amazing. Mr. Stay, we have a really interesting interview that's very close to my heart today. Tell us a bit about our guest, Matthew Ralph.
Matthew Ralph is a British best-selling children's book author who lives in London. When he's not busy writing his next book, he enjoys drinking tea, eating fish and chips, and waving at the Queen. He's very much, if you watch this on YouTube, you'll see he's got the Union Jack branding in the background. He's very, very, very British. Matthew is just a delight. He tells us how his first book, Sam the Speedy Sloth, went from an idea to a bestseller, how he applied his marketing background to launch the book and sustain sales. He gives us some great tips on writing blurbs and marketing copy, talks about testing books before publishing, and talks about how the LGBTQ market is evolving. It's brilliant chat.
Excellent. So let's dive in and listen to Mark chatting with the wonderful Matthew Ralph.
Matthew, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very well. How are you?
We are absolutely tickety-boo, thank you. The sun is shining and it finally feels like summer is here. Now, I want to talk about your extraordinary children's books, which are just an incredible success story. But I did read somewhere that you wanted to be an author when you were 5 and then forgot about it for 20 years. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I think it was probably more like 25 years. But yeah, so I'd always wanted to be an author. I always was writing little stories and things like that. And then when I was about 28 or something like that, I hadn't done anything up until that point. I was in the airport and I was flying somewhere and I saw this poster with a sloth on it. And I just thought it was really funny that there was this sloth. And I thought, oh, well, what would it be like if a sloth was quick or speedy? You know, what would that look like? And then all of a sudden, this idea popped into my head while I was on the flight to write a children's book about a sloth that was speedy sloth. And then I started thinking, what would the character's name be and how would that work? And then sort of just the first line of the book, because it's rhyme, sort of just came into my mind. In the rainforest of South America deep lives a curious creature, most often asleep. And that just sort of came into my mind. I don't know where it came from, but because I didn't have anything else to do on the plane, because you can't use your phone, I just wrote it all down on my phone in the notes section. And then I turned it into a bestseller a bit later on.
So if it wasn't for airplane mode, we might not be talking today.
Exactly, yeah. If I'd had the distractions of YouTube and Instagram and whatever, then perhaps my muse wouldn't have found me, perhaps.
You were working in marketing at the time. What had been stopping you from writing? Or was it just something that you thought, oh, I'll do that one day? Or had it just slipped away from your consciousness?
Both. I think I hadn't really written anything, but I'd been writing obviously marketing things, like website copy and whatever, but not books. And then years before, I had thought about writing a book and I had started it, and I just kind of got a bit either bored or just a bit distracted with life. And then all of a sudden I thought about children's books, and I'd never really considered children's books before. I'd only ever thought about books for adults. It just kind of came to me. And I think because I was so busy doing my day job and everything, it just kind of, was not a priority. And then I thought, well, actually, I may as well try it. And then here we are. A couple of years later, I'm now doing it full time.
Sam the Speedy Sloth occurred to you on a flight. How long did the whole story take to come together? Because we're talking about an illustrated picture book. Very few words, which I think a lot of people assume that's going to make it easy. And it isn't. How long did it take for Sam the Speedy Sloth to come together?
So I wrote probably about 60% on the plane, 70% maybe. But then obviously there's the editing and all of the rest of it. The fact that it was written in rhyme also made it obviously a bit harder and more sort of, I had to think about it a bit more. But from then, the actual illustration process was actually quite quick. I went on Fiverr.com and because I'd looked into traditional illustrators online and it was quite expensive and I just didn't have the money to pay thousands of pounds or dollars for it. So I went onto Fiverr on the recommendation of someone who I knew and found an illustrator, and she was a lot more low cost but did amazing illustrations. I've got the book here just to show the cover if anyone's watching. It's a really nice full watercolor, things like that, hand drawn, and it was actually quite low cost. And it probably, so I think from the time that I wrote it until I published it was probably 8 months maybe.
Right.
But some of that was sort of back and forwards learning because I didn't know what I was doing. So there was probably some streamlining that could have, been obviously made quicker. But I think, probably 6 to 8 months was the time it took from idea to execution.
Okay. What were the biggest lessons learned during that period? Because obviously you're working in marketing, so you have a marketing mind. How did you apply that to what you were doing?
So the actual writing itself, I suppose that's similar to the writing I'd been doing before for websites and social media and all the other things that I'd been doing. And then the idea of the actual marketing was useful because I think a lot of authors who don't have any marketing background just think, well, I've written the book, I can put on Amazon and then expect the sales to come flying in. And obviously I know from experience that's not the case with other things, not just books, but with anything. So as soon as not just before, but when I launched it, I thought, well, I'm going to have to get reviews somehow. So I looked into how to do that. I got a big group of people on Facebook groups and things, volunteers, I got them all lined up to leave a review for my book once it was published. And then I looked into marketing options like newsletter promotions and paid advertising and things like that. And that's how I sort of managed to snowball it a little bit. Because once you get a couple of reviews, you start to then get more organic sales. But to get sales on a book with no reviews is quite difficult. Mm-hmm. So it does take some initial outlay of time and effort and money to get that. So I think the biggest lesson would be to get a marketing plan and everything up beforehand and make sure you have all your ducks in a row, so to speak, or your sloths in a row, in my case, before you start actually doing the marketing and everything.
When it comes to marketing copy, I think authors are very often the worst people to do their own marketing copy. Do you have any tips for writing blurbs and marketing copy? Because it's one of these things, particularly if you're English, if you're British. I can see the Union Jack cushion in the background there. Bigging yourself up. It's not the done thing, is it? How do we write a sizzling blurb for our books?
So I think, yes, I agree. I found that a lot of authors don't know how to do it, and I actually do. So I'm now a full-time freelancer on Fiverr.com, and I offer things like book editing as well as book description writing. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people hire me to do it for them now because I have a marketing background. So I'm almost a marketer first, then an author, rather than the other way around sometimes. So I think the best thing is you've got to really sell your book. You've got to think about what makes your book special compared to other people's. You can't be too salesy, and you have to try and say, buy my book without using the words buy my book, which is easier said than done. Yeah. But you really have to think about who your target audience is, what problem they have that the book is going to solve, and who the actual end user is, and how do you get to them. Particularly with children's books, that's not always obvious because children don't buy their own books typically. Mm-hmm. So you have to it has to be appealing to the child, but also the parent or the adult, because they are ultimately the people who will buy the book. So yeah, it can be very complicated.
What are the parents looking for? Are they looking for a kind of a reassurance particularly with young children's books as you're writing, because yours are aimed at children about 3 to 5 years old. What are parents looking for at that sort of age?
I think it's a combination of things. I think they want, obviously, a high-quality book that's written well, got good illustrations, that they also want to know from, when they look at the book, they should be able to immediately tell what the book is about and what problem it will solve or what topic it deals with. And I think you've got to be very clear about what it is that what message you're trying to push in the book, because all children's books really have a message and some sort of teaching in it, whether it's inadvertent or advertent. It's sort of, it has to have something, otherwise what's the point of the book? So I think you've got to be very clear, if it's about, for example, my books are all about diversity, inclusion and things like that. So if you make that clear from the start in your description, whereas if your book is focused on something, particularly something maybe slightly more controversial or something that isn't mass appeal, you've got to make that clear. It's fine to write books about those topics, but you don't want a parent to be surprised or disappointed when they buy the book.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your latest book, Family Means, which is absolutely adorable. A book like that, which encompasses family, and as you say, it celebrates uniqueness, it celebrates inclusivity. Does a book like that, because you mentioned you have a launch team and you must know your readers well, does a book like that come from knowing your readers and the sort of things that they want?
Yeah, definitely. So previously I'd written books that were more sort of fictional, like Sam the Speedy Sloth, and they were about diversity and inclusion, but not necessarily specifically. It's not necessarily obvious. The book is about a sloth who feels different to others because he's speedy. Whereas I then got quite a lot of feedback from people saying, I really like this, but also, have you ever thought about writing topics to do more on a humanistic level rather than animals or whatever? So the idea for the idea for Family Means came from, I think, especially with, there's so much nowadays, we talk so much about all these social movements. And I think with things like the Black Lives Matter movement and all these other great movements, that was really, in my mind, I thought, well, actually, this is clearly a topic that has always been important, but nowadays people are a lot more aware of those issues, and children's books don't always tend to deal with them in the most obvious way, or they tend to, it's either too advertent and it's almost pushing a message that's a little bit uncomfortable, or it's not obvious enough. So I kind of wanted something that was cute and sort of heartwarming, but also had a message and provokes a discussion with parents. And, so this is like the book, and it's obviously very sort of family friendly, and it's got lots of different, like, diverse people in it. So different ethnicities, backgrounds, genders, sexual orientations, everything. I kind of wanted the book that would appeal to lots of people and show that family isn't just one way. It's not just a mother and father or whatever. It can be anything.
How wonderful, wonderful stuff. Do you test the books for, I mean, you have a launch team, but do you sort of get children to read it, or parents to read it with their children and work on their feedback?
Yes. So I have a launch team now that I'm sort of obviously a bit more established, and I've sort of built up a good team of people who are sort of, really useful, and their insights are really helpful. And yeah, a lot of them are parents, and they will read it with their child, the initial draft, not obviously before it's created, when it's just text, basically.
Right.
And it's a good idea to do that, I think, because otherwise you might be putting a lot of money towards getting illustrations and a book created, and then realize that the book actually isn't very good or doesn't address an issue that needs to be addressed. So to me, I always want to get feedback from the parents from a point of view that they are the ones buying the book, or the adults. But then also the children themselves have to understand the book and enjoy it. It's not just for the parents. It's mainly for the children, really. But the parents are the kind of gatekeepers, if you like. So you've got to appeal to both people.
Wonderful stuff. Earlier on, you sort of blithely mentioned, oh, yes, I had a launch team for my first book. How does one create a launch team? Do we just knock on door to door, or how does it work for you, Matthew?
So I found mine mostly through Facebook and other social media. So I basically just went on different Facebook groups or Instagram and just sort of looked for people who I thought would be my target audience, posted in groups, parenting groups, things like that, saying, I'm a children's book author. I'd love to get feedback from parents. And also it's a collaboration that, if you want a type of children's book, tell me and I can help create that. Right. And a lot of times I think that they really like being involved in that process, because their feedback really does affect change. Like, I will actually change the book if enough people, or if everyone says, no, you need to do this instead of this, I will change it. And I have. So a lot of people, I get lots of feedback saying, I really enjoyed this process, and it's really cool to be see sort of the behind the scenes element of creating a book.
That's great, because they take ownership of it, essentially, don't they? They feel they're very much a part of it, and that helps them start spreading the word, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly, because obviously then you're creating a community, and also, like you said, they feel like they have a stake in it as well, so they are more likely to promote it and talk about it with people they know, and also buy copies themselves. But I like getting feedback from people, because I want to make sure that the book is going to actually solve the issues and talk about the things that I want it to. Because obviously you could have a great idea in your head, but unless you get another opinion from someone who does have children, I don't have children at the moment. So obviously I want to make sure that I'm actually thinking in a way that other parents would think.
Your books are beautifully illustrated, fantastic colour all the way through. We know that children prefer a physical product. They like a book they can get their sticky little hands on. So what's your sort of quality control process on that? Where are you getting the books printed? And do they go sort of, through vigorous testing, first of all? Because you also have wonderful things. You have interactive stuff at the backs of it. You have word searches and puzzles and things at the back as well, don't you? So where are you getting your books printed? And again, are you giving them to children first to read and play with?
So I get mine printed. They're printed on demand via Amazon, or Ingram is the other company. So Amazon I use mainly for, that's my paperbacks. And I also do Ingram for hardbacks because Amazon don't currently offer that. So I get them printed on demand. I obviously order my own copies first to make sure that it all looks okay and make sure that, like you said, I have not only interactive sections at the back, and I want to make sure that the paper quality is good enough that you can actually write on it if it's a word search or whatever. And like you said, obviously, clumsy hands, sticky hands and everything. You want to kind of make sure that it can stand up to it, but also that it looks good, that the ink quality is high, the colors look good. So I always order my own copies, and then often I will ask one of my launch team, they will get a copy of it. If they have children, they'll obviously give feedback on it. But generally, Amazon obviously their printing quality is pretty good these days. And because I've done so many books now, I kind of know what to expect. So the quality control part in terms of the actual physicalness of the book is not as much of an issue now because I already know that it will probably be good. Nowadays, when I get book copies, it's more to test that the colors look right and that all the images sit nicely on the page. Because, for example, on my books, I have in my New Family Means book, for example, I've got their double page spreads.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure that the fold in the middle, it lines up so that it doesn't, you're not cutting off half the image or something like that. So that's more what I use. I buy pre-copies of my book for, basically, to make sure that it's okay for the end user.
Fantastic. Let's talk about the LGBTQ market. How have you seen that evolve specifically in children's books over the last few years? Because certainly when I was growing up, there was very, very little out there. And now it's there's a greater awareness of having books for, much more inclusive books. How are you seeing it evolve, and what do you see coming in the future?
I think like anything, social movements develop, and I think regardless of what the social movement is, sometimes it takes time for it to sort of catch up. And I think now, obviously, we've got there's so much more content, whether it's in books or anything to do with the LGBT plus community, or whether it's even just different races and things like that. Now we have so much more representation of all of these, what were previously minorities, and now they're becoming obviously more prevalent in the media. And I think now there's so many more books about specifically LGBTQ plus people and characters. And for example, in my book, I do have a same-sex couple in Family Means. So I definitely wanted to include that, as well as other minorities that aren't usually represented as highly in books. Because a lot of the feedback I get is that a lot of the books that you find tend to be written by Caucasian authors, and they only have Caucasian characters or heteronormative characters. So I very much wanted to write a book that was for everyone and had every single child should have the opportunity to see someone like them in a book, whether it's their ethnicity or their family makeup, whether they have one parent, two parents, different genders, whatever. So I think that's definitely become a really big market, and you can just see there's so many more books now that are being released on those topics. So I think it's definitely going to evolve more. I think more and more those sorts of books are going to become more commonplace. So I think that's definitely something that I've identified, and also it's just important to me I want representation in children's books, or books in general, but specifically children's books. So to sort of teach the next generation effectively.
Absolutely wonderful stuff. What's next from you, Matthew? I see you're doing personalized books as well, which is wonderful. But what's coming next from you?
Yeah, so like you said, I do personalized books for my Speedy Sloth book. So rather than it being Sam the Speedy Sloth, it's Matt the Speedy Sloth or Mark the Speedy Sloth or whatever it might be. So I do that as like a sort of side thing as well, and that's going really well. As I mentioned, I'm also a freelancer. So I've been a full-time freelancer for about a year now. I started just before the pandemic started. So I now offer book editing, book description writing, keyword research for Amazon, keyword and categories, copywriting, marketing strategy, launch strategy for books, and to increase sales reviews and things like that. So obviously I'm growing that side of my business, and I've been doing that, like I said, for a year now, and I'm sort of making a full-time salary from that now. So I want to build that out more. Obviously, I want to do lots more books, whether it's more Sam the Speedy Sloth or more Family Means, or that kind of ilk of book, that's definitely something I want to do, and I want to create a full portfolio. And the dream, I guess, is to become a full-time author that creates a platform and a community for my readers. That's what I would love to happen.
Fantastic. I think it's only a matter of time. Matthew, where can we find you online?
So my website is mattralphtherewriter.com, or you can, if you go onto Amazon and just search for Matthew Ralph or Sam the Speedy Sloth or Family Means, you'll find my book, and there I've got linked to my Amazon page or my my website and my social media and all of that. And also, if you do want to hire my services, on Fiverr as well.
Wonderful stuff. We'll put links to those in the show notes, folks. Matthew, thank you so much for speaking to us today, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much for having me.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. Well, that was a very eventful plane journey. Who would have thought?
Wouldn't it? Yeah.
To go on, jump on a plane, and by the end of it, you've written 60% of a book you didn't even know that you had in you, 60% of a book that you didn't even know when you were waiting in departures that was going to pop out the other end. I think this could be a whole new thing for writers, get on a plane. I don't know about you, Mark, though. I get massively inspired when I go to airports. There's something about the airport bookshop. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's something if I ever get more than 5 minutes spare, I spend my entire time. I'm not in duty free checking out the booze or the perfumes. I'm in the bookshop dreaming about seeing my book in an airport, because it seems to me to be like, it's almost like the pinnacle of like, it's Mecca, right, for authors to get into an airport bookshop.
You've really touched on something here, because when I was at Orion, there were certain authors who shall remain nameless that we would get a heads up when they were going to be flying in. And we would send advance teams to the bookshops to make sure their books were on the shelves, because it is a real status symbol. It is a real status symbol. And if they land, they will go to the bookshop and check that their book is there. And if it's not there, they might throw a minor wobbly. So it is a big status symbol, and it captive readers, they can't get out, until their gate is called. So that is a real status symbol there.
It is. I mean, we always talk about, it's funny, it's taken us 5 years to talk about airport bookshops, but the thing is, there's the bookshops. Like, there's nothing like walking into a multi-level bookstore and seeing your book out. I mean, amazing. And then there's the supermarket, right? The supermarket, which is like, wow, this is big time. This is bestsellerdom. This is where that you have been selected from thousands to represent this week's 20 books on the supermarket shelf. But then, I think, even higher than that, airport bookshop.
Well, the other thing, two things. One, I would say getting your book into a small bookshop is perhaps a greater achievement, because they have less. But that's a whole other conversation. But,
the independent bookstores, right?
Yeah. Well, the other thing with airports is you get special airport editions.
Yes. And they come out. Do they still come out early?
A little bit,
because that was when I was a kid. There were books that would come out, and they'll tell me if I'm wrong, Mark. You'll know this. Months, like Stephen King, and that it would be like a pre-release almost of a book, and it would be like Super Size Me, kind of like cereal box size. Yeah,
it's called either a trade paperback or a C format. So you have ABC formats, then a hardcover. I mean, back in sort of 80s, 90s, you might have a Stephen King book come out months before it comes out in the UK, and vice versa. You might have British authors who, publish in the UK first and then come out months later in the States. So there was that. That's less of a thing now because basically there are 5 big publishers and they publish everything on the same day.
Yeah.
But you do have that airport edition, and the idea is it's a paperback because it's lighter. So you can get it in your luggage, and it won't, you won't be paying any extra. It's easier to transport. It's a little bit more disposable, perhaps. So, and it's definitely aimed at the kind of people who might only read 1 book a year on holiday, or have that fortnight in the sun, sitting on the beach, and they might read 5 or 6 books. So make them lighter, make them a bit cheaper than a hardcover, but more expensive than a hardback. And those are usually the first run. So you would have the hardcover in the high street, but the trade paperback or C format airport edition, which has a different ISBN, it's a whole different format in the airport stores. And they would, Smith's Travel, and there are Waterstones branches in the airports in the UK. They would order quite significant amounts of these. They tended to go for the big brand authors, but there were always, those breakthrough titles, and it was always seen as I've got an airport edition. That's fantastic.
Right. Well, yeah, I kind of miss it, to be honest. I miss the whole 6 months, because there was something really amazing about going to the airport. We used to go on the odd family holiday, to Europe. We would go to Spain where my grandparents actually lived quite a lot. And there was something really special when you walked into, like, pre-internet, guys. We're dating ourselves now, aren't we? But pre-internet, you'd walk into an airport and you would see your favorite author's new book that you didn't even know was even written. I mean, you didn't have any previews online about, I'm currently working on my next novel, or Twitter's about, just started this, or this is like, here's my cover reveal. There was none of that. I remember walking, and it'd be it would be literally kid in a sweet shop moment. You'd be like, oh my God. And you'd grab it. And then there was the kind of thrill of, like, sitting on the beach, reading this book that you think no one else has really got this book in the world. It's like you felt really kind of special. And I must say, I think we need to reintroduce that in today's world somehow, where maybe if you're writing a book and you have a really dedicated group of readers, why not give them the book? I mean, I don't know if you can't do this on Amazon, can you? But why not give them the book 2 weeks early or a month early? I just wonder if anyone's tried that, and I'd love to hear from someone that has.
If you're an indie author, you definitely can, and it's what Matthew was talking about when he's building a team. And you see, a lot of indie authors will do that ahead of time. It's something I'm thinking of doing with my next book as well, even though it's not indie. But I might, be able to give them early copies, or at least early samples. But the mainstream publisher wouldn't do that, because they'd, one way or another, they'd end up on sale on Amazon. Amazon is one of the things that changed that kind of early release thing, because suddenly you go on Amazon is the greatest book search engine in the world, if nothing else, because you can just look books up way as soon, because publishers are rubbish when it comes to metadata and putting their books out there, because film companies and record companies jealously guard that information. You don't know when a movie's coming out until the movie company tells you. You don't know when that record's being released until the record company tells you. Publishers, they go, oh, okay, we've signed the contract, put the data on Biblio and just feed it out to the entire planet. And
before
it's like,
the book's even
come
written.
on, you publish... Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, very often.
No pressure.
But
you're
part of my
already on
job
Amazon.
at Ryan, every now and then. Sometimes it was before the contract was signed, and there were times when people would say, "Mark,
excuse me,
actually, that book isn't happening now. So can we take it down from Amazon?"
Or another publisher's kind of in the running for it. Oh my gosh!
Yes, that has happened, and I'd have to explain to them, you do realise Amazon isn't the only book website, and this has gone to every book website, every book distributor on the planet, and it's out there. There's nothing I can do about that, but people struggle to cope with that idea.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Anyway, this has nothing to do with children's book marketing, which is what we were talking to Matthew Ralph about.
Yeah, I know, but it has everything to do with Matthew's story and how he started off. I mean, in terms of, let's dive into a couple of things. One of the reasons why I love this interview with Matt is for for listeners of this podcast over the many years, you might have, well, you know that I published my wife's book, self-published my wife's book, the very last monster book, and we had
Which is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. It's I can say that because it's not mine. I love it, and I think it was an amazing journey to go through the publishing of that book.
My copy here. Hang on.
Mark's got a copy. Yeah, we actually sold so many copies of that book, and we just did it as a hardback. And hearing Matt's kind of journey, we've never actually put it on Amazon. I mean, it is the next kind of, but to actually publish or print on demand a hardback book to the level that we did, because we had spot. What do they call it? Spot lamination, on the front cover. Nice. Really high end inks, like inside, like purple inside paper. Covers, and then we went for eco friendly paper, because that was a really big thing about making sure that we were being as kind to the environment as possible. And so it's a high end production book. But it was really exciting to hear Matt talking about his kind of board books, and that how he was actually putting them out as print on demand on Amazon and then hardbacks through Ingram. And it got me thinking. I thought, well, maybe there's a route for that down the road, because I think one of the biggest challenges that we ordered all the books up front, literally in the garage, and then we would mail them out. Like a little team of us would be mailing them out, and it's a lot of work. It's a huge amount of work. We're running the e-commerce front end. But to have something print on demand, I mean, we did that for Back to Reality, didn't we? I mean, that's how that book right there on my shelf, I got that print on demand from Amazon. It showed up like, I think 3 or 4 days after I ordered it. And it takes an incredible strain off, especially when you're doing, obviously self-publishing. So there's all kinds of options. And a lot of people would have said, you can self-publish an adult book. Oh, children's books, don't even think about it. But Matt's proving everyone wrong there, isn't he?
Yeah, if you think about what's changed just since this podcast started nearly 5 years ago, 4.5, 5 years ago, the way that the market for self-published children's books, I mean, I will point listeners to, we did episode 267, a deep dive with Karen Inglis, who is a fantastic self-published children's author. She sold over 100,000 copies, and she does a brilliant book on how to do that. It has everything, because I got a copy for Claire, to look at self-publishing children's books. And it's just transformed, absolutely transformed. And the quality of books that Matthew is putting out, you put them next to picture flats from the top publishers, you'd never know the difference. And that's what you need to aim for. You need to, because parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles who buy these books, they know quality when they see it. They don't want to be, because a lot of these will be given as gifts, and they have to have that gift quality. And as Matthew said, he tests them out beforehand. He's got the quality to a point where it's any child would be absolutely delighted to receive one of those books. So yeah, and this is quite a recent development. I mean, certainly recently, Amazon have been doing hardcovers on print on demand. I think it's invite only, because I think Queeve McDonald, who's hugely successful, both indie and traditional, but I think he was invited to do a hardcover. So folks, as soon as we're allowed to do it, we'll do one for Back to Reality. I'd love to see a hardcover of that. But it's always changing, always evolving, and I think Matthew is spearheading that.
Yeah, and it's a very unique part of the market. I think secretly we all harbour the dreams of publishing a classic children's book. I think anyone who's loved books as kids, like to be able to recreate something like that, to pay it forward to the next future generations. And it's something that for again, listeners of the podcast will have heard me talking about a book I've written called The Marshmallow Bear, which I set myself a challenge of wanting to illustrate it myself, because I got into drawing like about 3 years ago. And actually through that process started to recognize just how brilliantly talented illustrators actually are. I mean, I can draw a bit, but when I tried to do it, and I thought, I need to spend 15 years to really do something that I think would even start to get close to the quality of illustrators. So big shout out to all illustrators of books out there. You are amazing. But So listening to Matt's interview really kind of put fire into my belly of thinking, no, I really need to get some illustrations done for this book and get it out there and experiment with this, because I think there's something magical about having a kid's book. I mean, seeing what Jen's book's done, and I still get emails almost weekly from people saying, people are still picking that book off. They want to read that book. But there's something very unique about this market. And that is, alluding to what you said earlier about the importance of the parents, the grandparents, the adults, the preschool teachers, whoever it is that's reading the book. They are reading the book typically to the child. So it's a joint audience. Like, they're going to be holding the book. They're going to be seeing if the book lasts. They're going to be the kids typically don't recommend it to their friends at kindergarten. Yeah. It's the parent that says, oh, my kid loves this book, you should get this book, or they buy it. I mean, think about the market for birthday parties. Like, I remember the Gruffalo. I would buy that book for everyone because it was my kid's favorite book. And how many copies did I buy? It's a slam dunk. It's like I probably bought that book 20 times. I'm one parent. You're welcome, but it makes me think, like, there is, if you write a really good book, if you get a really great illustrations, but you have the quality of the book, then, it can be incredibly amazing from a career perspective, whether you go for like self-published or traditional, which I know is a lot. I mean, traditional is hard, isn't it, to get? They always talk about there's a lot of competition, a lot of pitches for kids' books, because so many people have ideas around them.
Yeah, it is very, very difficult. It is very difficult. But and you have to have that magic combination of writer and illustrator as well. Because Claire had this with her Lottie and Dottie book. She did 3 children's books about gardening. And she got this amazing, Orion paired her up with this amazing illustrator, Marieke van Veldhoven, who she had conversations with Claire about the designs, and then went away and then came back, and the art just astonishing, just so adorable, full of life, and just really brought those stories, took them to a whole other level. So there's so much of in the life of an author. You've got to find the right agent, you've got to find the right publisher, and if you're doing children's books, illustrator, you've got to find the right illustrator. It's there's so many factors that. But Matthew went out there and he went on the hunt. He went and did it himself, and there's no reason why anyone listening to this couldn't do exactly the same.
No, exactly. And I like the fact that Matthew also kind of thinks like he sees it as a business. I know a lot of writers struggle with this because there's a point where if you want to do it full time, it's great. If you can get a publishing deal with a major publisher, then a lot of that support is going to be there for you. But if you're going to be a self-published author, at some point you have to cross that threshold and say, okay, I've got to think about this as a business. When I'm writing, I'm in my creative zone. But when I'm selling or marketing the book, I'm in my kind of business mind, as it were. And we often see this, that very successful self-published authors often have an interest or an enjoyment or a previous or current career in marketing, or sales, or in that kind of outward facing role where they've kind of had to do other things. So they're not starting from scratch. And, the fact that he talked about having a marketing plan before, even writing the book or launching the book, those are words you don't often hear from authors, like the word marketing plan or business plan. And it's the bit that often gets missed. But he's proven that, like, if you actually set it out like a business and you think of it like a business, you're much more likely to succeed. And the fact that he's even had like a launch team, like a group of people that he works with, I mean, those will be beta readers and the illustrators, obviously, and probably assistants, etc. But the point is that thinking of what you're doing, it's not just about you having to do everything. It's about looking for people that can help you and building that team around you. In essence, you are building your own little mini publishing company, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I loathe marketing. And I worked in the sales and marketing department, and I it's something I struggle with, and but there are people out there who will help you. I mean, it might cost you, but they'll do the job properly. I think
Yeah.
if you are looking at this is a business and you can calculate whether or not you can get a return on your investment, it's definitely worth investigating. One of the things I found really interesting about what Matthew said, and I think this you can take this from children's books and apply it to any genre, fiction, non-fiction. He's talking about children's books. The reader is saying, okay, what problem do they have that the book is going to solve? So many children's books have an educational aspect to them. They will teach you something. You might be frightened of the dark. You might be frightened of spiders. You might be lacking confidence. You know, there's that whole LGBTQ thing that Matthew was talking about. You may feel that you don't fit in a world, you know, that where people don't look like you or whatever. And these books will help solve that problem. They will say to the child, look, you are not alone. There are people out there. Here is someone who looks like you in a book. And that's incredibly reassuring. Now, how do you apply that to your books? Because I think children's books that have a message, they're almost marketed like non-fiction. They're saying, here's a problem, here it can solve. So I think you can apply that to adult fiction, because what problems do adult readers have? They're not maybe perhaps as pivotal as the problems that those children might be encountering with identity or what have you. But the problem might be they want a thrill. They're going on holiday and they want to escape. They're in that airport. How can you fulfill that problem? You know, do they want to have some kind of emotional catharsis? Do they want to cry? Do they want to be scared? So think about what your book offers the reader in terms of solving a problem.
Yeah, we're touching now on a really important subject. I mean, we could go really deep on this, and actually, weirdly enough, we're talking about it in the Academy at the moment in terms of writing a book with purpose and meaning behind it, so that it will change people's lives. You know, don't think of your book as just, I'm writing a novel, which is a bit of a fun read. I mean, we found when we were writing Back to Reality, and although we didn't really know it at the time, it's often the case a theme comes out, you know, after you've written it, or towards the end, you're like, oh, actually, we can see what's happening here. And we had this really strong theme about mums and mothers, and looking at, you know, the incredible work and the dedication they have to their children. That was the thing that came out, which we didn't intend to write about. But I think if you do have a sense as to what you might be writing about when you start your book, it's more likely to come through more strongly throughout the book. So yeah, I think this is really important, because I think the other thing is we dedicate a lot of our time and our life to writing. And so what do you want that writing to represent in terms of the time, your investment in your life? You know, it's a chunk of your time that you're giving to doing this project. So make it count. Like, write about something that will leave people thinking about the world in a different way, or their own life, or give them a life-changing kind of moment where they're like, oh my gosh, this so applies to me, or I could do that differently. I think that's where the true, really intangible magic of writing stories, that's where it all happens. It's all very much underneath the surface, underneath the text. But I find I struggle with that, in the sense that I have to write something that has some kind of meaning and purpose behind it. Otherwise, I think, you know, why am I doing this? Because I could be doing something else. I could be doing something else of maybe value or contribution to society in some other way. So it has to count for me. And I think that's an important thing for other people to consider. I'm sure lots of people do have that.
That's a conversation about theme and having a central dramatic argument that means something to the reader. But that's a whole course.
It's a whole course
on the Academy.
Mr.
Start record. Yeah,
exactly. But I love it, and so much more. So if you are thinking of writing a children's book, if you've written, like me, if you've written a children's book and you're thinking of how to publish it or to get an illustrator, we want to thank Matthew for inspiring us, showing us the way, showing us how he's done it, because that's what this podcast is about. It's about celebrating the successes of people who've done it in many different ways. And Matt's taken a very unique kind of route on this. And, you know, so thank you, Matthew, for coming on the show and giving us your wisdom. And I look forward to hearing about how Matthew's journey goes as his career develops. So, Mr. Stay, what is happening on social media this week?
Lots of wins, lots of good news. Really, really good stuff. I had a lovely message from Trey Montague over on Patreon, and Trey was saying that she loves Mr. D's woo woo. Okay, so this is a fabulous episode. Love the whole interview and the chat that followed. My son made it to the Tokyo World Cup this year, and a key tool in the sports psychology box is visualization. All the top athletes do it, and it isn't only Mark DeVoe woo-woo. For the record, I quite enjoy his woo-woo. Well, Trey, we've all enjoyed Mark's woo-woo at some point. But yes, visualization. You talk about this a lot, don't you, Mr. D? It works.
Yeah, it does work. I mean, and I always say that it came from when I was doing athletics as a teenager with an Olympic coach. So, the Olympics is on right now, and we have 2 people from our town in West Canada in the track and field team for the Olympics. The Canadian high jumper who's 6th ranked in the world. And I'll just give him a shout out. Michael Mason, good luck, sir. He's going for Canada in a few days. And Alicia Butterworth, who went, and they both went to the same school as my kids. And they both, and we're trying to raise money for the new track. And these 2 athletes who are in the Olympics have got behind our little kind of raise $1.5 million to build this new track for the school and the town. So yeah, it's kind of bonkers. But I digress, because the visualization is such an important part of athletics and high impact, high power, high end sport. Why is it something that we don't think about doing as authors? Or why is it something we don't think about doing in our life? It's something I've done all my life, and I always attributed all the crazy stuff that's happened in my life to imagining it, visualizing it, willing it, dreaming it. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that that's being backed up by many people's stories, especially Olympic athletes. That's always quite handy to have.
Very, very good. In the Nicola May episode, Nicola revealed that she writes in bed. And we've had some great feedback on that. Sasha Green got in touch, says, so happy to know that I'm in good company. It's not just me who writes in bed. Her book, Something Like Happy, was almost entirely written in bed. And she has 2 more as yet unpublished books that are the same. And then Rhoda Baxter got in touch and said, since you asked if any books have been written in bed, all of mine were written sitting in bed. I get up, get dressed, sort the kids out, and get back into bed to write. She said, I think it's a leftover from when I used to write at night after the kids were in bed. She said, when I had a proper job during the day. And she finds the ideas, words come more easily when sitting in bed. We are onto something here, aren't we? So I might have to give this a try.
Excellent. We've also had an incredible message from Chel Vess, who's M. Rene Vess author. And she said, if you want to write but you're not sure how to get started, you've got to listen to the Bestseller Experiment podcast hosted by Mark and Mark. It's full of practical advice, encouragement and tools to grow your writing craft. Now listen to this bit, Mark. This is amazing. They've been a huge influence on my writing habits with the 200 word a day challenge. Listening every week is like chatting with friends while learning from all the amazing authors I interview. The Facebook group for patrons, supporters, it's one of the best writing communities full of genuinely kind and helpful authors. I'm so grateful for the difference they've made in my life. Oh, well, isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. It's quite spooky because my next bit of social media is from Shell, who put up a book sniffing post because she had a story published in the 3rd Tales from the Treehouse anthology, C is for Curse, which is a Swan Lake anthology of short stories. So she got that print on demand paperback. And as is tradition in the Bestseller Experiment, we always sniff the pages. I think it was it Panilla who started that one? Sniffing the pages when the book arrives. So big congratulations to Shell and all the authors featured in C is for Curse. And last of all, I owe everyone an apology. I've made a grievous mistake because in the episode with Nicole Kennedy, I made reference to the Steve Buscemi clip, the GIF, where he's an old man trying to pass himself off as a teenager, and I said it was from the show Community. At GM White writes, Jeff White, he got in touch to say, I hate to correct you, but it's actually from the marvelous 30 Rock. Well, of course it is, and we try to hold ourselves to a high standard on the Bestseller Experiment, Mark, but I'm afraid I've let you all down.
Slap your wrist.
So announcing my retirement from the podcast.
And next week our co-presenter will be.
It's all over.
I love it. Well, we love it when our
yeah.
beta listeners hold ourselves accountable, because that's what it's all about. So thank you so much for pointing out. I make stuff up all the time, Mark. I don't know if you've noticed that over the last 5 years.
Oh, we have noticed, yes. Don't worry.
Oh, do you know what though? If you've ever thought of doing a podcast, there's nothing like being like literally flying by the seat of your pants.
Put on the spot.
It's like it's brilliant. You don't quite know what's going to happen when you press the button. And I'd say, to be honest, like in the 5 years we've done this podcast, we've only had, I mean, very, very few people are very kind to us, not writing in and going, excuse me, but that fact that you said. But I actually love the fact that people correct us, and we can put our little addendums in the future editions of our newspaper.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Yeah. It's all good stuff. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We hope you've been inspired. We hope you get cracking. If you've got that kids' book somewhere on your computer or written in some notebook years ago, dust it off. Get it out there. Send it to some beta readers. Give it to some preschool teachers. Do something with it. You never know. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to document my little journey over the next 10 years. No, let me do this. Next year, Mark. Here we go. Dream declaration. I'm going to try and get that book either signed by a publisher or self-published within. Okay, end of November 2022. No, I'm not going to do 12 because 12 months. Go on then. You got me. End of July.
Come on. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So the Marshmallow Bear, let's write it down. I'll put it in your diary. Mark's got a diary, by the way, folks. He actually writes down all these dream declarations, and then he kind of emails you and says, so how's it going? Okay, so I've got to get to work now on that, but I have to get it done. I know I've got to get it out there. And thank you as well to all of our Academates patrons, etc. If you would like to support the podcast, it's bestsellerexperiment.com/support. If you'd like to read more about the Academy, pop in your application now before closing, academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. And if you'd like to do the free 200-word challenge, it's 200wordchallenge.com. And Mark, social media.
Come and find us, folks. We're on all sorts of social media. We're on Facebook, Bestseller Experiment, Twitter and Instagram @BestsellerXP. We have a Pinterest page I haven't updated in a millennia, but I might get back around to looking at that at some point. But also, please subscribe, rate and review on your podcast machine, application, or whatever it is you listen to us on. Any kind of rating helps make us more visible, helps us reach out to more authors. And hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, recommend us to a friend. Why not? A big thank you, as always, to our editors, Dave and JD.
And as it's summer in some parts of the hemisphere, if you are going to a beach or you just want a bit of escapism and fun, do download or read or listen to the audiobook of Back to Reality, which is out there doing great things. And we thank everyone for your incredible reviews. It's just great to please do review the book if you've read it. That makes a massive difference.
Someone recommended it the other day because I'm on a Terry Pratchett fan group on, and I've forgotten who it was. I'm so sorry, but some very kind person said, you know what, if you want to laugh, that's a bit Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams, read Back to Reality. So thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that. Because I only know because I got tagged in the comments. So thank you.
Fantastic. Oh, that's brilliant. Brilliant stuff. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark. And we'll look forward to chatting next week to another amazing best-selling author. And it's a goodbye from Mark 1.
And a goodbye from Mark 2. Ta-ra.
Goodbye.
Bye.